Earlier this week, a federal judge blocked the Trump administration from continuing its Remain in Mexico policy. The policy required migrants seeking asylum to wait in Mexico while their cases made their way through American courts. The Justice Department has appealed the judge's ruling. This comes as President Trump says he is not planning to resume family separations. Tuesday, I spoke with Gelernt. He is the ACLU's lead attorney in its family separation lawsuit and deputy director of the ACLU's Immigrants' Rights Project. I asked him about what concerns linger over family separations.
There are two big types of concerns right now, even if the administration doesn't go to fully restarting family separation, which we don't believe they could in light of the court order. The first is that there was an internal report by the government a few months ago that said there may be thousands more families that were separated that were never reported to the ACLU, where the lawyers in the case never reported to the court, never reported to the public. We are trying to find those families. We have said to the government we want to find those families. The court has said in a civilized society we need to find these families. Just last Friday night, the government submitted a proposal to find the families and said they want up to 2 years to find the families. That is unacceptable, and we will be pushing back in court this week on that. I mean, if we took 20 paralegals at the ACLU, we could go manually through all the files in a few weeks. The government's asking for 2 years. I mean, we're talking about little kids, 2 and 3 years old, and the government's saying we'll try and find them and locate them in 2 years from now. I mean, they may not even recognize their parents in 2 years. So that's completely unacceptable. And that's the backward looking of separations that have already occurred. The other real concern is that separations are continuing, notwithstanding the injunction we got in court. And those separations are occurring because the government is claiming unilaterally that a parent is a danger to the child, but not giving the parent any information or means to push back and not telling us about it. And what they're saying is, well, we thought the parent might be a danger to the child. When we finally learn information about the situation, we're hearing that the family was separated because the parent may have had a DUI 10 years ago or a non-violent theft. And those are obviously not acceptable reasons to take a child away from their parent. That obviously doesn't suggest the parent is a danger to the child.
When you say that there is no tracking system, you're talking about just a paper file or a case file that the government would have to go through?
Right. And so, you know, sometimes they entered some information in a database, but not other information. Sometimes the databases were completely separate, and so there was a database about the children and a database about the parents, but the databases weren't integrated. The government separated babies even less than a year old, and now they're just basically going through whatever files they can find to track who was separated. And we hope the court is going to put its foot down and say, when little children's lives are at stake, we're not going to deprioritize it and say we'll get around to it over a 2-year period.
Lee, I also want to ask you about another issue. A federal judge blocked a Trump administration policy this week that would require asylum seekers to wait in Mexico while their case is taken through the immigration court system. What's the significance of that ruling?
Yeah, I think that's enormously significant. That's another ACLU case, and we just received the injunction yesterday. What the government was doing was having asylum seekers wait for their hearings in Mexico. And the reason it was so horrible is because these families, sometimes, again, with little children, are sitting in squalid conditions. When I was there, so the families, they're piled on top of each other in these dirty shelters. But more importantly, it is extremely dangerous where they're being made to wait. Cartels are picking them off. They're being there's drug traffickers, there's murder of the migrants, and so for the U.S. government to say, well, we know you're fleeing violence, but we want you to wait in a dangerous area for months until you get your hearing is unacceptable, and the judge found it unacceptable. The other part of it is that when they come in to get their hearings in the U.S., the government was bringing them in an hour before their hearing. They can't possibly consult with counsel or really prepare for their hearings. So the whole thing was designed really to deter and stop asylum seekers. And the judge made clear that, look, in this country we have laws that allow you to apply for asylum. Not everyone's going to ultimately get asylum, but you have to be allowed to apply, and you can't be made to wait in a dangerous area, and you have to be able to consult with counsel. And the judge blocked it. Now, the government has said today that they're going to appeal it. We expected that, but we hope on appeal the court will rule for us again.
And so right now, what are the biggest legal battles you think that lie ahead for you and the ACLU?
Yeah, I think there's a few. One is certainly family separation continuing. Another is the asylum ban the president enacted right after the midterms that he talked about during the midterms, which we challenged 2 hours after the ban went into effect. We've gotten a nationwide injunction on that. It's up in the Court of Appeals. The other is what we just talked about, making asylum seekers wait in Mexico. There are other cases about them trying to limit asylum by saying you can't get asylum if you're the victim of a domestic violence. There's a bunch of cases that are going on that we're involved with, and I think they're all important, but the ones at the border are really critical because it's not just now it may be Central Americans who need our help, but it's been different groups throughout our history, and I think we all need to remember that it's very dangerous to say we're not going to help people who are fleeing persecution.
All right, Gelernt. Lee, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.